Oh, so how's it going this morning? Is it okay? Yeah, yeah, it's okay.
I had a question about that map critique on week 4.
Yeah,
When I did look at it, it said 0 points, so I figured I can ignore it. But now it's saying it's worth 20 points.
yeah. So you have to do 3 map critiques, and I'll take it late, but my advice is not to completely trust point values on Canvas, instead rely on the syllabus. And there's 2 reasons for this. And I'd say this is probably true across all your classes. As we transition to Canvas, the right way to do it is to teach side by side with your old learning management system and your new learning management system. ISU decided not to do it that way and instead gave us about a month to transition. And so given that like a person like me teaches 13 classes in a 2-year rotation, it's going to take me 2 years to transition fully to Canvas for all my classes. And then another iteration of 2 years to make sure that like core assignments like that one are in Canvas properly. So it's definitely in the end my mistake, but the transition to Canvas from a faculty point of view was a complete catastrophe and done almost as badly as possible at about the worst possible time. Can you tell I'm a little salty about this? And I'm sure it's affected you all as students too, because of things like this, where when I import something and it's supposed to be fully importable perfectly from Blackboard, I bring it over, I expect it to come over the way it was. And instead, every single question on every single assignment is given a value of 0. And so I try to catch them all, but I didn't catch that one. So yeah, you have to do 3 map critiques to earn your grade. That's one of the requirements in the course. So get that submitted soon. Yeah. Yeah, so if you go back, I think it's in week 4 here, map critique 1. I graded the ones that were submitted. So all you do is, here, it looks like this when you go to submit it. All I want you to do is find a map, any map, that you think is interesting or worth talking about, right? Then say what's good and what's maybe not good about it, how you might improve it. Yeah, yep. It could be, you know, a map of Middle Earth. It doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah. So the idea is really to talk about cartography, not about data or about, you could talk about the idea behind the map because that's going to be reflected in the cartography, but it's really to focus on how could this map be better and what does it do well, right?
I guess I put mine in blog.
In the discussion forum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so got to submit it. Yeah, otherwise I can't really grade it in this context. So submit it. If you didn't submit a map critique, get it to me. I'll take this one late, and I will try to remember to go and double check that the points are correct in the future ones. So they go like 20 points for the first one, and then the second and third ones increase in point value, right? Yeah, thank you for asking. So I went into grade, all your grades are completely up to date as of yesterday afternoon. And when I went into grade, I was like, this question set to 0 points, right? So this was literally at 0 points here. And I'm like, what the heck? It's supposed to be 20. Again, so I know a little bit about how the best practices for transitioning to a new learning management system because I have been in lots of discussions about how it should be done. And then I watched how IU did it, where they went from whatever the heck they had developed in-house and they moved to Canvas. And you could teach in either platform and move stuff back and forth for a period of 2.5 years. For ISU, it was 1 semester plus a month of August, and that's it. Right. So we didn't have a lot of time to move. So sorry about that. All right. Any other questions or concerns? Okay. So for today, we talked about choropleth maps and what you should consider when you're putting them together. Remember, choropleth maps, you just shade an area according to value, and it's one of the most common thematic map types, right? Now, there are 2 rules just to recap. One, you should have areas be of roughly the same size and shape, right? Now, roughly is a matter of interpretation. You can, you know, even in like, say, US counties, we got some counties in Southern California, Nevada, et cetera, that are huge and shaped very differently than the counties that you might find in Rhode Island. And you can get around some of these issues by standardizing or normalizing our data, making them into a ratio or a rate instead of a raw data value. And that kind of gets around the fact that a bigger polygon might hold more data values. So for your first lab for this class, which is here in the week 6 module, the goal here is for you to build a choropleth map with some direct guidance in ArcGIS Pro. So if you open up the instructions here, we'll go through the process of building a choropleth map. Now, for some of you, if you touched GIS before, this is going to be pretty straightforward. If it's new to you, it might be a little bit harder. And so that's what we're focusing on today to help. I'm here to help you get started and walk you through some of the process. So I'm not going to read the lab assignment out loud because you're capable of reading, I'm guessing. And this isn't Maps and Cartography, the audio book, right? But the basic process here is one where I can give you an overview pretty quickly, and then I can help you troubleshoot as you begin to assemble your stuff. So I'm going to have you for this lab assignment work with data from the Indiana Map Layer Gallery. Just so you know where this is coming from, indianamap.org is the state's website for geospatial information. All the data on this site come from a partnership with local, state, and federal agencies of all kinds. Also, the private sector and academics in Indiana that produce or work with geographic data. And so you can search on this. The new website, maybe it would make more sense to you. I don't know. I think the new website's pretty garbage. in terms of finding data that you're looking for. So, for example, I know for a fact that the Indiana map portal should have named places. But when I search for named places, they don't show up. If I go to the legacy website and I look at reference, I can find places here, and there are different populated areas, populated places, etc. For whatever reason, when we search this, even if I type in populated places, it does not bring up what I know exists, right? So your mileage may vary. You might have a better luck with the current indianamap.org website and the search box here. I tend to have better luck finding exactly what I'm looking for by going to the legacy website. So this is just the old version of the website. I'll be totally hosed when they upgrade it and get rid of this, right? But until then, we can exploit the more logically and usefully, at least in my opinion, laid out Indiana map website. So in the layer gallery here, we have a series of tabs. These are reflected in these tiles as well. And so I might want to make a choropleth map, maybe about a health issue. So here's an example of opioid pills distributed per person per year by counties. So, because it's Wednesday and we want to have a highly uplifting map, I guess we'll choose this, right? Now, you might notice that there's some options here to add a layer, preview, or map service. If I go to preview, it will open up a map that shows me what the data look like actually in a choropleth mapping format, right? I can download the data from this link here on the left. So I'm going to download the data. This comes out pretty quickly because it's not that big. And then when I get data from the internet, 99 times out of 100, it's going to download in a zip file format. So I'm going to have to extract the data from a zip file. People know how to do that? Have I had the zip file talk with y'all? Yeah, the gym bag. How? Okay. Let me briefly see this is a struggle. Okay. So the suitcase metaphor doesn't help, apparently. And I'm not criticizing you, I'm asking, right? So it doesn't make sense. Okay. So it's more of a technological hurdle than a conceptual one. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. I understand now. Maybe, hopefully. Okay, so zip files they're like a container, right? Like a suitcase, but like a suitcase using stuff inside, we have to take the stuff out. That's where the technology comes in, is unpacking the zip file or extracting the files from the zip file. These are all synonyms. They mean the same thing. And so when we download a file like these opioid data that have a zipper folder icon and say compressed zipped folder here, right? And in fact, if we turn on file name extensions, it'll even have a .zip on the end, right? I have to get the stuff out of there. Now, I might be tempted to double click because we all are trained to double click on stuff in Windows, and that will indeed open up the zip file. But this is like unzipping the top of your suitcase, opening it up and looking inside, right? You still can't necessarily use the stuff in the bottom of your suitcase or the top of your suitcase until you take it out, right? So you might be tempted to just double click into this. That's fine to show you what's in there, but it's not going to allow you to actually use the data in the software. So my advice would be, when you get a zip file, to go ahead and either right click on it and go to extract all, or there's this pink contextual tab up here. Notice when I don't have the zip file selected, it's not there. When I do have it selected, it is. You can click extract and then extract all. It'll bring this, that brings you to exactly the same place as right-clicking, going to extract all. And then you'll want to find a good place for this. On these lab computers, putting it in the downloads folder is fine if you don't intend on keeping things for more than this class session. All right, and that's because the main hard drive on these lab computers is locked down so that any changes you make now will be erased when you restart the computer. And this is to keep the lab running smoothly. It's an OIT thing. Although I will say this is one area where OIT does a good job, because I've maintained labs without this technology and it sucks because every computer is different and then the instructions on what to do is different. These are all set up exactly the same way. And that this software that erases whatever you do to the computer right now when it restarts is the main reason why things work okay in the lab. So instead, if you want to come back to the same computer you're using and do this work, if you're using a lab computer, that is, you would choose, instead of on the main drive C, we are going to go to this PC and choose the drive labeled thaw space. That is drive Q, I think, on every computer in this lab, but just in case it's not, go to thaw space. And then create a new folder, maybe with your name, right? Or something that would identify you. And then put the data that we're extracting from the zip file into that folder. So I'm going to extract these opioid data into the Steve folder on the thaw space drive. It's a little bit annoying. And if you're like to be a kind of a more visual person, I can show you how an alternative way to set this up in a sec when this is done extracting. You know, for someone who's been using computers since they were like 8, and when I was 8, computers were not easy to use at all. In fact, you didn't even need a mouse. You have this thing, right? Keyboard. Yeah, command line. I mean, everything looked like this, man. Everything looked like this. This was how you interacted with the computer. And if you were real clever, you could make it show more than just text. But you had to be real clever. Okay. If you would like to do this more visually, I would suggest you make use of Windows, the kind of Windows user interface here. And so I have my, let's see, I have only one. Actually, maybe I'm in this situation. I downloaded the data. I'm like, where the heck did it go? Right. This is a common thing that folks in this class and Intro to GIS and even the grad level survey in GIS sometimes run into. So if you're in this boat where you're like, where did my files go? Don't feel bad. Start up a Windows File Explorer. You can get to it. Usually there's an icon on the taskbar there. You can get to it as well by just hitting the start menu and typing in Explorer, right? And there it is, File Explorer, or you could type in the word file, it'll open. Or if you really like to be clicky, you should be able to find it in, let's see here, they move it every time Windows changes. I never launch it this way. Windows accessories, no. Windows System, File Explorer, it's right there. All right, so I have one File Explorer window open, and I can use the kind of snapping features of the user interface here. I'm going to drop one File Explorer over there on the right, and then I'm going to open a second File Explorer window on the left. I'm going to snap that here, right? And then I'll find my downloaded file. I know I saved it to the downloads folder. How do I know that? Because I looked and remembered. Most web browsers these days default on Windows anyway to the downloads folder. So good chance that when you download something, it'll end up there. And then on this in this window on the right, I'm going to go ahead and find that thaw space Steve folder that I made. And then I can double click into the zip file and then just drag and drop my stuff to my folder over here. It'll accomplish the same thing as that extract all. Right. So if you like to be draggy and drag and droppy, you can do it this way too. I don't need to override data that's already there. Does that help a little bit, maybe? A little bit. The main thing, the main take home message, I guess, to make, if you want like a heuristic, just a basic rule, is if it looks like it has a folder with a zipper on it, you can't use what's in there until you go through the extract all process. Right click on it, extract all, put it in a good place. Yeah, give it a try. Okay, so because I've saved my data here in this Q drive, it's going to be there when I come back tomorrow or next week or whatever. So just remember, if you save something on this local disk C, it will go away when the computer restarts. And the computers in this lab restart at like 1 a.m. every day. So even if you just sign out, your data will go away later in the night, unless you put it on the Q drive. The other option is to plug in a USB drive, right, a flash drive, or you could sign into OneDrive and upload all your files to OneDrive. I would suggest you need to feel very comfortable with OneDrive to do it that way, because you're going to be bringing stuff back and forth between OneDrive and your local computer quite a bit if you do it like that. Okay, so now in order to start my choropleth map with this opioid data, I'm going to open up ArcGIS Pro, and just as a refresher, when you do that, this is what the window looks like. As we had previous projects we worked on, they show up here on the left. The center column here gives us the ability to start a new project. And over here on the right, it's some self-guided training resources. These are actually pretty good if you ever want to kind of dig in. And what we're going to do is create a new project with a blank map. So I'll click map, and I have to choose a location for it. Now, again, if you're working in the GIS lab here on the GIS lab's computers, you're going to want to give it a good name, right? And then choose a location that doesn't have this C colon in front of it, because this C colon is the local drive, the main hard drive that gets wiped every time the computer restarts. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this browse button and go find that that thaw space Steve folder. And I'm going to put it in there. Right. So my map is going to be created. My map project is going to be created in the Q Steve folder, and then it's going to create a new folder for this project called Opioid Use Indiana. And I spelled opioid wrong. Opioid. Yes. You can, or you can just watch, and then in a few minutes I'll say, okay, now you start. It's up to you. Okay. On your computer, anywhere you're comfortable. I'm not comfortable with my computer at all. Okay, so a couple of suggested locations if the computer you're using is yours and not typically, no one's going to go in there and screw with your stuff. A good place for it is in the documents folder, right? So you can go into documents and create like a GIS cartography, maps and cartography folder, although avoid spaces, underscores, and dashes in the file names and folder names. You could also make a folder on your main drive, on your C drive. Do you know how to make a folder? It's okay. All you have to do is decide where you're going to put it. So where are you going to put it? Documents. Okay. So in documents, how do you create a new folder? Right click, new folder. That's one way. Right, something like this. And then that's where I would put all my data, and that's where I would save my project here. Okay. So in that extraction process, I would go to my downloaded file, right click, extract all. And then when I hit browse, I would go to documents and then the folder I made and extract. Cool-ish. There's, as always, with anything computer-based, there's usually multiple ways to do this. So to create a new folder, there's also a button way up there at the top of the File Explorer window that looks like a folder. That'll create a new folder as well, if you don't like to right-click, right?
Just really because my MacBook is converted to a Windows computer, so I don't know how to work it when I put it in
Windows mode. Yeah, it's weird. And right-clicking is strange too, right? It's a two-finger tap. It's funny because Windows PCs, many of the newer ones have the two-finger right click, but most Windows users are like, where's my right-click button? Yeah, it's strange. Somehow your MacBook is now polluted with Windows. I'm sure that's how you feel, right? It's like, yeah, I'm sure it was a whole thing. I've never actually, because I've never owned a Mac. I've never, like, literally the last Apple device I owned was an iPod Classic that I left on an Air Japan flight in Bangkok, Thailand in 2011. That's the last Apple device I own. So I have no idea. Well, I could definitely do the process, but I don't know what it's really like because I've never done it once. Okay. So back into ArcGIS Pro, you've created your folder, you know where you want to save your stuff, and it's going to be different for everybody, right? Like Robert's folder structure might look different than mine. There's no rules that you have to follow. There are some suggestions I could offer, but that's more appropriate for maybe a GIS class or even a more advanced GIS class where we talk about, all right, what really file management, what really should that look like? And there's a lot of opinions, right? There's not so many hard and fast rules. So in my case, because I want this to stick around, so Friday morning when you have questions, I can show you examples from this opioid map that I'm putting together. I'm putting it on the Q drive in a folder named Steve, and it's called Opioid Use Indiana. So I'm going to create a new map now. I'm going to take it a second to create it. Because this is in this managed lab, it'll take more than a second to create, unfortunately. All right, so while this is getting ready, what other things might go on a map? If I wanted to make something like this that showed the counties that might have more significant problems with opioids than others in Indiana, what other context features might I want to put on my map? Not just county boundaries, and then using choropleth techniques, changing the colors of each county. What else might I want to include on my map? Like if it looks like this, what might be missing? So labeling, I might want to consider that. I'm going to guess that my county opioid use map has each county labeled, so I can do labeling if I need to. Anything else that I might want to add?
Not a legend.
No legend. So I'm thinking more along the lines of, are there any real world features I might want to include here for context? Or what's that?
States around it.
States around it. Yeah. So I might want to find a state layer map. No, unfortunately, state boundaries are not part of the Indiana map layer gallery. So this brings up another issue, which is where do I get other data from? And actually, a Google search will often point you in the right direction. So I can type in US state boundaries, GIS data. And we come up with Census Bureau. That's US Census Bureau. That's pretty reputable, right? Yeah, hopefully. So I can go ahead and get a boundary file for states here, 2018. I have homelands for Native peoples, congressional districts, counties, divisions, metropolitan metropolitan statistical areas, nations, regions, states. Here we go. And then I have to think about what scale I want my state boundaries to be at. We've talked a little bit about scale. So, you know, like fine scale is going to have more detail, right? And broad and coarse scale is going to have less detail. Well, in this case, if we look at the file name here, and notice the Census Bureau doesn't take my advice and they use underscores instead of spaces. There should be no spaces, underscores, or dashes in here. You'll notice there's 500K, 5M, and 20M. These are the scales at which the lines were actually created. So think about tracing state boundaries on a map at this level. This is 1 to 54 million scale. And if we go to 1 to 500,000, which is the most detailed, this would be, it'd be like digitizing state boundaries at this scale, right? Pretty detailed overall. So if I try to find state boundaries here, this is somewhere in this area, right? Anyway, so state boundaries at 1 to 500,000 scale are going to look about like this, right? So pretty detailed line boundaries, whereas 1 to 20 million is going to look like this. So if I trace a line over the Mississippi River here, it's going to be much less detailed than if I trace a line over the Mississippi River here. Does that make sense? A little bit of sense? So when I download these, I've got to think, all right, what scale would be good for just Indiana and the surrounding areas? Maybe 1 to 5 million. That's what 5M means. So now I have another data set in my downloads folder I need to use. Now for this lab, you don't have to go out and find random data. If you don't have states around the boundary, around Indiana for your map, I won't ding you for it, but good thinking. And I'll have to, do the whole extract all thing for this again as well. Okay, so now that ArcGIS Pro is ready, I'm going to maybe zoom out so we remember that we're in the US. And then on the main ribbon here, there's a tab called Map. When I have a map active in my main view, it will be active. It will allow me to click on the Map tab up there. And I just want to add the data that I've downloaded on opioid use by Indiana County. So I'll go to the Add Data button here. Now, like many buttons in this software, there's a drop-down menu. In this case, I just want the main functionality. I don't need to use a drop-down menu. I just click the main icon, but it's the same as going like this, right? Clicking the down arrow and clicking Add Data. Now, in order to add my data, I have to go find it. And I, as you know, downloaded and extracted it to the thaw space drive in the Steve folder, and I have opioid data. And now I have in here a whole bunch of info. I have, this is a real bummer. They've changed how this is shown. I have a whole bunch of tables. Look at this. Each table is a county, and if I open up a table, it doesn't show anything. I can view the table, and what does it tell me? It shows who's selling opioids and what county they're in. Oh, these are actually, wow. These are actually individual sales of opioids. Wow, this is way more detailed than it was the last time I looked at it. So we have in Adams County 14,656 people, or at least prescriptions of opioids over the period covered by these data. Okay, maybe I need to use a different data set because this is going to be way more technical than I expect any of you to get to for this lab. Let's see if we can do this though. If I look, when I go into this geodatabase, which stores all these features, these this icon right here indicates a table, right? So you see all these, and in fact, if I extend this just a little bit, it says file geodatabase table, And then I have two non-tables in this geodatabase. If you look around, all of them are tables except these two options. So we have opioid distribution, Indiana cities and towns as a, looks like dots, right? And then we have opioid distribution, Indiana counties, looks like maybe polygons. So I'll add both of these to my map. And now I actually have a map display, right? That's great, but choropleth maps don't use points, right? They use areas. So I'm going to turn off my opioid points. So notice in my contents pane, if I can uncheck something, it turns that off. Keep in mind, I'm pointing this out because my class that happens after this one, like 4 people were like losing their minds over this particular issue on Monday. Keep in mind that the drawing order, the order in this table of contents from top to bottom is the drawing order. So if I put these points underneath the polygons cover them up. Okay, it's just as a FYI. So now I have Indiana counties, and allegedly in here, there's something about opioid distribution. And so remember, geographic features have the geographic features themselves, but then attached to those features is usually attributes, right? So attributes are things about that geographic feature. I'm going to right click on this, or 2-finger tap on the Indiana counties polygons and go to the attribute table to see what information about each county is included in this data set. So I have name, which is helpful for if I try labeling, which I'll show you how to do in a moment. And then if I scroll over, I have, population in 2010, population all the way annually, all the way to 2018. Then I have pill total. I could go read the data about this data set. That's called metadata to find out what pill total means. This would be the total of pills prescribed, opioids prescribed between 2006 and 2012. But then I have individual years. So let's just look at pill total as a variable. So I want to make a choropleth map that shows pill total. Now, in your particular data set, you could, or your particular lab assignment, you could use the opioid data, but you could use something else like the census data that's available on Indiana Map. So it's up to you. You don't have to do this, but the mapping techniques are going to be the same. So I'll right click on this opioid distribution Indiana counties layer and go to symbology, which we've done before here in class. At least I have, right? And then my primary symbology is going to switch to graduated colors because that's what choropleth mapping is. It's graduated colors according to some variable. And now I'm going to switch the field that it's basing the graduated colors on to the pill total. So, sorry. And then maybe I don't like this very alarming color scheme. Maybe I want to pick something a little more colorblind safe, something like that, right? And so I have my choropleth map, basic choropleth map already set up. It's all it took, right? Except what's one problem I have with this map? Where's the worst place in the state for opioid use? Do you think that's true? I've been there. Yeah, so we're violating one of those things about choropleth mapping, that one of the assumptions or guidelines, right? Which is that we should have uniformly distributed population across our enumeration units. Now, we can't force people to move to a different county because this is the US, right? It's not China. And we do have somewhat differently shaped size and area, size and shape county boundaries, right? Some of the counties down along the Ohio River are much more regularly shaped than those in the middle of the state, and some are quite small, right? So we have to normalize or standardize. Plus, I mean, Marion County is going to have the most opioids prescribed because the most people in the state live there. Right? It's like 700,000 people, way more people than in the rest of any other county in the state. So we need to normalize. And so we might normalize the pill total by the population in 2012. And suddenly Marion County doesn't look like it has as much of a problem. Now, problem, or maybe that's a little bit pejorative. It doesn't have as much as intense use of opioids. All right. Okay, so what does that mean? This is pill total per person, and at the low end, it's between 0, just over, under 1 pill per person, up to about 210 pills per person. Now, I don't know if you've ever been prescribed these kinds of medications. I hope not. But back in 2012, it was a doctor prescribed this stuff like crazy. I went to have a wisdom tooth extracted, and they gave me like 3 months supply of one of these opioids, which I didn't use one of and turned back into my pharmacist the next week. Because this stuff's dangerous. You don't want it around your house. It's dangerous because you could develop a dependency on it. It's dangerous because someone who's in your home could find it and take it and then develop a dependency on it. It's gotten a lot better in some places, but if you talk to somebody in emergency response, they'll tell you that when they decided to become an emergency medical technician, for example, they wanted to save people's lives and help them when they were injured or in distress. And what they didn't realize is that they would just be, they would often be responding to overdose situations, in large part due to opioid use, right? Opioid pills leading to people who use heroin and other opioids. Okay, enough lecturing about don't get involved in opioid addiction. So at the low end, 209 pills per person sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but I've been prescribed this about a decade ago, like I said, for a dental procedure, and was given 90 pills, right? Didn't take one, turned it back in. But that's, so 209, that's high, but compare that to some of the most intense counties where there's 530 to 830 pills prescribed per person. Now that per person includes children and folks who've never touched this type of drug, right? And so if you're the DEA or your state health officials who are trying to combat opioid addiction, where do you prioritize your actions? It's going to be in places with these higher levels, right? So right here, we have our basic choropleth map, but making a basic map isn't it is the part of this assignment, but we had a couple suggestions about how we would make this map better. For one, really our map is floating in space here. And so we want to add those state boundaries. I just have to click on the add data button, head back to my ThawSpace Steve folder, and I can find that those polygons. And notice the outline is green instead of gray. That's because it's a different data type. It's one of those shape files. And then I can, oh no, my beautiful choropleth map is covered up by the state boundaries. How do I fix this? Well, I could drag it underneath. That fixes it. Is a kind of mustardy, greeny yellow color a good one for the state boundaries? What color should I pick? White. All right, so I go ahead and click here, and on the actual shape, I can go to the properties for this and choose a white color and hit apply. Not so bad, right? Uh-oh, something weird's going on with Indiana here. Ooh, what if I did this? Yeah, so the state of Indiana, the boundary of the state extends into the lake. Lake County actually goes into Lake Michigan, right? So I've got a couple options here. One option is for me to not worry about it, right? But once in a while, you get a map user who'll be like, wait a second, what's up? Indiana doesn't have a perfectly flat boundary around Lake Michigan. Another thing I could do would be to find Great Lakes GIS data, right? And here is the Great Lakes Commission, Great Lakes geographic boundaries. And I could do, how about Lake Michigan shoreline might fix this for us. And in this case, ooh, you know what? Because this is a online feature, I could also do this. Now, this is kind of cheating a little bit for your class, but I wanted to show you how this works. When I click add data, you might notice that I actually have to scroll down to get the stuff on my computer. And there's a reason for this that I'm not fully supportive of. And that's that the vendor of this software wants to turn this into software as a service rather than standalone software. And so they want you to subscribe to their platform, which ISU does, and most companies and agencies that use GIS do, but they want you to be kind of locked into their ecosystem, just like Apple. And to do that, they want to try to start delivering as much data as possible through streaming map services, rather than data that sits on your local computer. Now, for you as a student in a maps and cartography class, I mean, that sounds pretty nice because you don't have to download stuff, extract it from zip files, etc. But from a science perspective, it makes it a little harder for you to have complete control over what data make it into that online map service, unless you create the map service yourself, right? And the fact of the matter is, this company is not the only one who produces geographic data. And so you don't want to be completely dependent on them, because there's plenty of places that don't. But if you go to the add data button and you go to Living Atlas, we can actually search this for various themes. And we might find, let's see, American boundaries, American Community Survey boundaries. We might find, let's get past the ACS ones. Let's see if what this does. So I add this in. It's going to stick it on top here. And unfortunately, let's see, can we, yeah, we can change this. So instead of % population, I'm just going to change this to single symbol. This one won't work for us for this purpose. So I'll search for lakes instead of Great Lakes. Maybe there's an all lakes layer. Here, we'll just add this one in. So this is going to be Lake Michigan, or all lake bathymetry, but whatever. I can make a lakes layer available for you. I have. So don't worry about that for now. Okay, what else might we need to do to make our map attractive? Robert, you mentioned a legend, and we have that here, except if we were to export or share a map, like I click share here, and I say export map, which is, by the way, how you save like a JPEG or whatever of a map you've made. I go ahead and click export, and then go find where I exported it. I don't have a legend. And I've got, I mean, it's zoomed way out. The mapped area is not really appropriate. All these problems, right? So what I have to do to actually design a full map rather than just a display is to create a new layout. And this is also part of what you'll do in your lab. So I'm going to go new layout, and I'm going to just make it letter sized. There's lots of different options. You can also make them landscape or portrait. And then I've inserted my new layout, and now to actually put my map on this page, I'm going to click on map frame and find that map and draw a box. My map comes in. Now, there's some problems here. One, I don't want to be quite on the edge of the page, so I'll resize my map frame a little bit. By the way, you can create guides to help you align things. So maybe we want to, have the same kind of space here. So it'll snap to my guides that I put in. I can churn things on and off here, but what if I want to make my mapped area better? If I zoom in and out with my scroll wheel, I'm actually doing this, holding the paper digitally and going like this with it, right? And so, but what I want to do is, instead of holding it closer or further from my face, I want to change what's displayed inside that map frame. So what I have to do is make sure the map frame is selected, and then I can either right click and go to activate, which is usually what I do, or I can go to map frame format. Nope, not there. Sorry, map. I can go to the layout tab and click the activate button here. And now I'm not zooming in and out of the page. I'm repositioning my data on the page. And maybe something a little like this would be better, right? Now I might want to actually reposition my map layout, but we're running out of time, so I'm not going to do that. The other thing that we need to include here at least is a legend, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on the insert tab, and notice there's a legend box. Click on legend. Draw that out there. Oh, look at that. Now, what are some criticisms of our legend here? Well, opioid _ distribution _ Indiana _ counties isn't very nice. So I can change that by modifying how it's discussed here, or even I can expand my legend and change this with a going to properties, right click and go to properties. But I usually change it in my actual map frame or in under map frame in my contents, right? So I can go here and say opioid use or opioid prescriptions in Indiana. And then pill total divided by estimated population 2012 is not a very visually pleasing way to say this. So you might say prescribed pills per person 2012. And so I made these little changes in the contents pane. They are reflected automatically in my layout here, right? Also, maybe I know that these are state boundaries and they're just there to provide context. So I'm not going to include them in my legend. See down here, it's CB 2018 US state. I can uncheck that and make it go away. A couple other things just as I leave you, because we're at time. You can insert north arrows here. There is no, I'm going to make a strong assertion, but prove me wrong. There's no beautiful north arrow built into ArcGIS Pro. And you can insert scale bars and other features in here as well. On Friday, begin lab 1 between now and Friday if you get a chance. Bring me questions about how do I make it look like this? How do I add this? I don't know how to, where do I find highway data to provide more context? But the lab should guide you through making a pretty straightforward choropleth map using data from Indiana Map. All right. Lab 2 is you have to go find data on your own. So you also might think a little bit about that for next week's lab. Sound good? All right. I'll see you Friday. Yeah, Friday I'm not going to like come up here and lecture. It'll be bring your issues and we